This episode of The Charity Show is brought to you by The Good Studio, creating great content for good causes. Hello and Happy New Year. You're listening to The Charity Show, a podcast about what it's really like to work in UK charities. In each episode, we sit down with people from across the sector to talk honestly about the job. What's been tough, what's helped, and what they've learned along the way. Chief executives, trustees, fundraisers, volunteers, and comms professionals. These are real conversations about great charity work from people we can all learn from. If you're enjoying the show, do hit follow, leave us a quick 5-star rating and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. So here's what's coming up in episode 40. Oh, I think you've got to kick the year off with the New Year's Honours list, really, haven't we? The headlines are always grabbed by the celebs, aren't they, in terms of who's been nominated for the work they do, hosting random programmes on the telly or whatever it is that they do. Fair play to them. But behind all that, amongst the list, there's always a great spattering of charity names as well.
We have a very active, very successful world music department, which is trying to take music kind of in a culturally relevant way into those communities. All of our children get the loan of an instrument free of charge. So we really do try and break down the barriers to access, recognising that, like, as you say, you don't want it to be the thing that a few people can access, because that's just wrong, isn't it?
Something I don't know about you, Piers. Are you musical? Are you? Do you play an instrument?
I went through a phase of picking up a guitar, as most people did, thinking I'm going to be the next, I don't know, next Nirvana or whatever. No, not at all. I do regret, and I don't know why, there's nothing stopping me, I do regret not maybe learning the piano. I've always thought the piano sounds amazing if you could just go and just start, tapping away on the ivories, as they say.
So basically what you're saying is you want to be one of those people who just goes to Waterloo Station and starts playing the piano. That's what you want to do.
Welcome back to The Charity Show. I'm Piers Townley.
And I'm Tim Bainan. And this is the first show of the new year, first show of 2026. We're back. Happy New Year. How was your Christmas? How was New Year? How are you doing?
Went in the blink of an eye. Always does, doesn't it? It's that old cliche. You spend all the time prepping for it. You spend all the time clearing the emails, signing off the campaigns, getting all the work done, getting all the presents wrapped back at home, and blink of an eye, it's gone. Yeah, straight back into a new year.
I don't know what it is about coming back after Christmas. When you come back after the summer, it doesn't feel like this. But when you come back to work after Christmas, it just feels so much harder. Why is that? Why is that so weird?
I don't know. But there's 110 days in January till payday, isn't there? The weather's still a bit dark and dreary. You haven't got any more mince pies to eat. Everyone's a little bit slow on the energy. Energy's generally low, unless you're surrounded by people who are constantly telling you about how much they're going to do the new year, new me, which I'm just like, oh God,
no, none of that. I'm still ploughing through the Christmas food. Although we got loads left over of like just junky stuff, mince pies and stuff like that. But it doesn't taste right in January. It's weird. You can't eat Christmas food in
context,
January.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Doesn't feel right. What about the work front? I think it's been a bit of a tough couple of weeks for you.
Yes, it is. Over at the Brain Tumour charity, we had the devastating, sad news of author Sophie Kinsella's death just before Christmas. She has been a supporter, and the family have been supporters of the charity since her own brain tumour diagnosis a year or so ago, and we've spent the last 2025 doing lots of concerts with her and exclusive events and just supporting the family and having their support for the work that we do as well. And obviously she passed away just before Christmas, so that was a lot to deal with as a charity. Obviously our thoughts and prayers go out to all the fans and the family of Sophie, but so we just kind of come into terms with that. It's always a bit of a sad event, when this sort of news hits, and it just knocks you sideways as a charity. I felt very privileged to know Sophie a little bit in very, very small capacity through my work there as well, so it just kind of hits home what I'm doing and what we're doing as a charity as well. But so yeah, it's got to deal with that. And then on the back of that, I don't know about yourself, it's a leap into trying to plan out the next few months and the early start of 2026. We've got a huge brain tumour awareness month happening in March. BTAM, it's a big kind of national push, so that'll influence all sorts of fundraising and policy. So it's all about all that planning, that kind of, you can just see the frenzy just beginning to come as we plan ahead for those. So what about you, Tim? How's your start to the year been?
Yeah, not too bad, but I'm sorry to hear the news about Sophie. It was very sad when I saw that, Piers, and I thought of you, and it is a tough part of what you do working in the charity, that, you know, the brain tumor charity, and there's so many other charities that are cause led in terms of, you know, conditions and life, you know, life impacting and life limiting conditions, and it must, you know, it's one of the parts of the job I think that is underestimated in terms of its impact on people, in terms of, you know, you guys know and work with celebrities and famous people, and not just that, and, you know, everybody who's impacted by a brain tumor, and when they pass away, it undoubtedly impacts you and your role in the charity as a whole. So, you know, I think it's something that, you know, that kind of impact on the well-being of those who work in the charity sector when things like this happen can't be underestimated. It's a really important conversation to be having, I think. As for me, yeah, gosh, it's a bit of a strange one. This is my first 2026 is my first full year as a charity freelancer, as a sort of charity comms freelancer person type thing, whatever it is I'm doing. I don't know really. But I'm quite excited by that in terms of, you know, what lies ahead. And I'm looking forward to discovering the different organisations and people I'm going to be hopefully working with over the course of the next few months. Had a really nice piece of work which I finished just before Christmas, and we launched with Cure Parkinson's. So it was a series that I did with them, a limited series, a podcast series of 20 episodes, which essentially had an introduction episode, and then it was told the story of the charity's founder, Tom Isaacs, and who has sadly passed away. But it was his story in his own words, an audiobook that has never previously been published or shared, telling the story of his book, which is called Shake Well Before Use, and as he walked around the coastline of the UK. So an incredible 4,500-mile journey that he undertook, and it's an amazing piece of audio to listen to in terms of, in his own words, how that went and how it impacted him and what he achieved along the way. So not that I'm blowing my own trumpet at all or anything like that, but I thoroughly enjoyed working on the project. It was absolutely fantastic, and it's a really good listen. So thoroughly recommend Googling Shake Well Before Use and taking a listen if anyone has a spare 20 hours or so to listen to that. So it's a great listen. But yeah, also a bit about, we have got to stay warm at the moment, Piers. It's a bit chilly outside. Are you a fan of the cold?
I don't mind it so much. It's quite difficult when you're in an office. It's fine. It's someone else's heating, isn't it? When you're at home with the blanket over your lap and just trying to do the hybrid working. But yeah, I'd rather the sun came out a bit more.
Yeah, we're sat here in scarves and hats and gloves, and yeah, absolutely right. Anyway, so we've got a fascinating interview coming up with Sharon Bell, Chief Executive of Services for Education, and they're a Birmingham-based charity that uses music and learning to build confidence in children, young people, and communities. It's a really interesting conversation with Sharon, and she talks in this conversation about her squiggly career. It's a term she uses, a term I've heard before. And it's quite a squiggly career that she's had. She started life out as a chartered accountant and has ended up becoming a charity chief executive. So fascinating to hear how she got to there and what that involved. And I think that kind of sums up a lot of people in the sector. Not many people sort of, start out wanting to be a charity professional. Well, some people do. Lots of people find the sector through other means and get here in a sort of slightly twisty, squiggly way. Would you say, Piers, you've had a squiggly career?
Yeah, I think so, Tim. Well, we're both ex-journos, aren't we, at heart and stuff, various formats, various outlets over the years. And mine took a turn just when my dad was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and I had, outside of my journalism work then, we were using the charity without even thinking I might end up working for it. So yeah, almost by a set of unusual, sad, but also, hey, coincidences brought the two together. Squiggly is probably a good word. I think that's probably the way forward. I think the next generation coming up, squiggly will be how they have their careers.
Definitely. Would 20-year-old you be surprised by where you are now?
Yeah, I think they probably would be, actually. Yeah. I don't know. This is it's an unusual path, but, an incredible path. Absolutely. The sector is incredible. Doing some amazing stuff. Love it. Do it.
Yeah, excellent. And also, obviously, Sharon talks a lot about music and the work that Services for Education do. Something I don't know about you, Piers. Are you musical? Are you? Do you play an instrument?
I went through a phase of picking up a guitar, as most people did, thinking I'm going to be the next Nirvana or whatever. No, not at all. I do regret, and I don't know why, there's nothing stopping me. I do regret not maybe learning the piano. I've always thought the piano sounds amazing if you could just go and just start, tapping away on the ivories, as they say.
So basically what you're saying is you want to be one of those people who just goes to Waterloo Station and starts playing the piano. That's what you want to do.
I think it's just being in a hotel lobby at 11 o'clock or in the bar in a hotel at 11 o'clock at night, seeing one in the corner thinking, it'd be good if I could just jump on that. Yeah, but I don't think it'll happen. Maybe not. Yeah. What about yourself?
Absolutely not. Tone deaf completely. Absolutely useless. But I have huge respect for people who can play instruments, and as I say, it's lovely to, if you go to a party, I'm always jealous of those people. As I remember growing up, you go to a party and someone pulls out a guitar from somewhere and it's like, oh god, that's just showing off now. That's just not fair. How can you do that? Yeah,
it's the ultimate icebreaker, isn't it?
Definitely. Anyway, let's jump into this great conversation with Sharon. This week on The Charity Show, we're joined by Sharon Bell, Chief Executive of Services for Education, an organisation supporting schools, children and communities across Birmingham through music, outdoor learning and specialist education services. In this interview, Sharon talks about the role music can play in children's lives, not just in the classroom, but in building confidence, connection and a sense of belonging, particularly for young people who might not otherwise get those opportunities. We also discuss what it's like to lead a values-driven organisation working closely with schools and local authorities, and how Services for Education balances creativity, access and impact at scale. Sharon also reflects on her wider involvement in the sector, from volunteering and governance roles to the responsibility leaders have to give back and help shape the future of education and culture in their communities. The conversation split into two parts with some charity news in the middle, so let's get into part one. Sharon, lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us here on The Charity Show. It's lovely to welcome you onto the show and find out a bit more about you and all that you do.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, no problem at all. Thank you for being here. Now let's just rewind a little bit. You very kindly, when you sent us your email, gave us a little briefing sheet with a few details, which was fabulous, really fantastic to find out a bit more about you. And I'd love you to share a bit of that with our listeners. One thing that stuck me in there that I'm just keen to dig into a little bit, you described your career as being squiggly. I think that's a great term. I love a squiggly career is a brilliant term. And it really is. You're a chartered accountant, educator, charity leader. When you look back on all that now, does it still seem squiggly? Does it make sense? Do you still think, how on earth did I end up here? Or what's your view as you look back?
I have to say, the word squiggly, somebody else described my career as squiggly, and I thought I like that. I'm going with that. When I look back on it now, it does make sense. And each kind of step along the way kind of led to the next step, if you see what I mean. So as you say, I started as a chartered accountant way back when, and probably I knew I wasn't going to be doing that forever, but equally, I probably didn't know then the different roles that it would open up. And actually at one point when I worked in the career service at the University of Nottingham, we actually said to students then, we're sort of preparing you now for roles that almost don't exist yet. And to an extent, that's true, perhaps less so with my career, but certainly, I never really thought when I was I was actually a student at Nottingham as well back in the day, but I never really thought that where I started with KPMG would then lead to being a charity chief exec and a few other things, airports and aviation, along the way.
I think I'd describe my career as squiggly. I think most careers it's very rare actually that you find somebody who spends 40 years in the same job anymore. It just doesn't happen. So I think it's quite normal.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? I think way back when maybe there was a sense of when people entered the workforce, that's what they were doing for years. And maybe that's what the sort of textbooks of way back then said. But now, in reality, it definitely doesn't happen like that. And we see that in terms of people moving on in the workplace as well and stuff. So I think it is much more normal, but it is still quite interesting when you track back.
Absolutely. Looking at sort of common threads though that sort of run throughout your career and over time, is it fair to say that arts and education in particular is something that sort of hooked you and sort of kept you where you are and in that kind of space?
I would say more people, to be honest, than really. I think that's probably the theme that you can track back, and that sort of being passionate about the individual and their growth. Now, of course, that then does lead into education when you think about the settings. When I sort of moved away from perhaps more commercial setting like an airport and working at the University of Nottingham and then a college and now leading an arts education charity, it has been about the people, I think, and kind of wanting people to develop to be the best they can be. So I think that's probably the golden threads that I would pick out when you look back.
And I think that's very common with charity folk all around. If you're not a people person and people isn't at the heart of all that you do, then you're not going to be a very good charity person. So I think that's
I think that's
quite
fair,
common.
isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, tell me a little bit about services for education and all that it does and your role. And tell me, well, for those who might not be aware, tell us a little bit about services for education.
So we are a registered charity, not for profit, based in Birmingham, and we have two main parts to our work. So we deliver all of the music teaching in the Birmingham schools. So we incorporate what some people might know as the music service in Birmingham. So through that part of what we do, we employ about 180 music teachers. We teach about 30,000 children a week out and about in all the schools in Birmingham. So that's a big chunk by number of colleagues in terms of what we do. And then we also have a highly skilled training and consultancy division that do a lot of work with school leaders, training and consultancy, a lot around safeguarding, because obviously that's really important. And interestingly, because of the importance of safeguarding, we're beginning to do a little bit of work in non-education settings. So, for example, one of our advisors recently was speaking at a conference for veterinary professionals. So, it does kind of, I think it's going to sort of branch out a little bit into other areas. We're also a little bit interesting, I think, because although we are a registered charity and we have been for sort of 12, 13 years now, once upon a time, before that, and before me, I've been chief exec for 6 years, we were part of Birmingham City Council. And way back when, before me, there was a decision taken for the organisation to come out of the council. And essentially, it was three parts of the council came out into a separate organisation and became an independent charity. So that does make us a little bit different in history and also actually in makeup, because you made that comment about the charity sector, and I absolutely chose to take the job I've got today. But some of my colleagues were part of our organisation when we were part of the council, so maybe a bit of a less deliberate decision, if you see what I mean.
Sure, of course. Tell me, just out of interest, because I'm ignorant to this completely, but how normal is it for a charity to deliver such a significant part of the curriculum across such a wide area? Is that so normal?
It's becoming so every part of England, I mean the UK in one way as well, but if we just think about England for a moment, will have a music service doing important work in schools. If you think about it, it's what's often called the peripatetic music teachers, so the ones that go in and take the violin or the drums or this, that, and the other, into schools. Historically, very much it was part of the council, but now I think the statistic that does get mentioned is it's about 50-50 now, whether it's still within the council or whether it's out in an independent organisation. And then we would then work, so in Birmingham, for example, in the music part of what we do, we would then work closely with other charities, like, for example, the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, to make sure that we're kind of aligned in what we're doing when it comes to music and arts education. Because what you don't want is multiple charities trying to do the same thing and sort of replicating each other. It's much better that we kind of figure out together how we can make maximum impact in the city.
It's a fascinating conversation, actually. It's really interesting to find out a bit more. Obviously, with the people we talk to on the charity show, quite often we talk about those close relationships between government and charity and how the two need to work side by side, public and private sectors, and the third sector, and the role that the third sector plays in all of that. And it's becoming increasingly significant, and it's something that is obviously really central to what you do.
And it's actually, I just say as well, it's actually central in an element of our funding as well, around the music part as opposed to the school support part. There is some government funding for music education, which is distributed across the country based on a formula. It's administered through the Arts Council. So we get a share of that pot, if you like, based on number of pupils in Birmingham and various other criteria, but it is formula driven. So we have a chunk of our funding. It is only a chunk. It's less than a third of our income as a charity, but does come effectively from that route. So again, we don't have to. We're not fundraising for everything that we do in the way that some other charities are having to do that. We do fundraise and we do have sort of more of a traded income as well. But that sort of initial pot that we get is quite important, particularly in primary schools, to kind of introduce children to music for the first time.
Fantastic. I want to talk to you about introducing children to music. And you said before that music isn't just a nice to have, it fundamentally changes children's confidence, communication and well-being. Can you give us a moment or a story perhaps that sort of really captures that for you, or something that springs to mind that you can remind you?
There's many. I mean, to be fair, it's my colleagues that are out and about on the front line, and they see that every day. So they probably see the really small things. I tend to see the things where it's like on the bigger stage. So as an example, and not so long ago, probably about 6 weeks ago, we were down at the Royal Albert Hall because one of our groups, Birmingham School Symphony Orchestra, had been selected to perform in a gala proms night that's arranged by a national charity called Music for Youth. Well, you see those children having that experience on that stage, and those are the kind of memories that last for a lifetime, really, because let's face it, most of us don't get the opportunity to do that. But closer to home, at the end of the academic year, we do a series of concerts at Symphony Hall in Birmingham, and I tend to get the train in and out of Birmingham. And what's lovely on those evenings is you find yourself walking back to the train station at, I don't know, 9:30 at night, whatever, and you've got that child, that young person, excitedly talking non-stop to the person that's come with them, who's probably just trying to get them home and to bed. About the experience on the Symphony Hall stage, and there's a confidence that comes from that. And what we do here, and they're much more individual then, are stories of young people who have kind of found their thing in music. They've found that confidence that maybe they don't have in the classroom in other areas, but you put an instrument in their hand, or you let them be part of that massed choir, or whatever it is, and it kind of unlocks something for them. And I think that's really special, and it must be special for their parents or carers that are seeing that on those occasions.
Yeah, and also sort of breaks down that sort of society-wide misconception, perhaps, that if you to succeed in music and to make it, into successful orchestras and onto the big stages and like the Albert Hall, you've got to go to a private school where they've got the funding and they've got the teachers and they've got the expertise. That's not the case.
No, we want to do everything we can, and part of that kind of funding that we get sort of via the Arts Council is to make sure that we're giving as many opportunities as possible. Also so Birmingham, is an incredibly diverse city in terms of makeup. And we need to make sure that the music offer that we deliver reflects the diversity in the city. And there's always more that we can be doing on that, definitely. But for example, we have a very active, very successful world music department, which is trying to take music kind of in a culturally relevant way into those communities. All of our children get the loan of an instrument free of charge. So we really do try and break down the barriers to access, recognising that, like, as you say, you don't want it to be the thing that a few people can access, because that's just wrong, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say perhaps to a head teacher who, obviously schools are under pressure and there's demands on budgets from across the curriculum and from across subject areas? What would you say to head teachers, or to a head teacher who perhaps said to you, I'd love to do more music, but we just can't afford to do it?
I would say you need to talk to us or talk to the people like us to understand the context you're working in, to see what we can do to help that, to see if there's a different way of delivering it. Maybe it's not. I mean, obviously we're in and out of schools every week, and that's amazing. But there's other ways of doing it, whether that's the kind of workshop in that last week of term, or something that can introduce children in the first instance, and then we can figure out what else we can do. So, for example, we would have over 100 ensembles, so think of mini orchestras across the city that, again, are free of charge. So there are, once you've got the instrument into the child's hand, or they're in a choir and they're finding the joy of singing, we've then got different things that they can tap into, which, yes, they're outside of the school day, but it doesn't always have to be within the school. I was going to say 9 to 5. I don't mean 9 to 5, but
yeah, I know what you mean.
It's 3 school day.
Sure, yeah. Sure. And you touched on earlier on the fact that your work extends a little bit beyond children as well and beyond schools. Tell us a little bit about that in terms of the sort of other areas you're working in, and what have you learned along the way in terms of the sort of lifelong impact of music and that lifelong love of music?
Yeah, well, I'll give you a music example, then I'll perhaps give you one from our other area, which is quite an interesting one as well. But so yeah, we do extend into different settings, and that will often be where we are fundraising for or kind of getting grant funding for. So, for example, a couple of choirs in retirement villages, so the sort of community choir thing, which, there's a real joy for those residents who come together and make music together and then perform to the rest of that retirement community. And I've been fortunate enough to go to a couple of their concerts over the years, and that's just great fun. You see that. We had at one point, I must admit, I don't know if she's still learning the instrument, but at one point we had an 80-something-year-old clarinet student, which was just amazing. But we also do work for adults with profound and multiple learning difficulties, as an example, because music, unlocks something in them that other kind of interventions don't. And again, that's obviously very specialised. The team that do that work is a specialist team, so it's not just within the school day. And then on the other side, our school support team, as I say, they largely are working with school leaders and teachers. But within that setting as well, there is a funded project that we do called Health for Life, and that's about bringing healthy eating and living awareness into schools through a project which is corporately funded. And again, that's really interesting because over the years, that project's been running over 10 years. But it's been working initially in some of the most disadvantaged areas of Birmingham and introducing those children to, the concept of growing vegetables in a square foot garden type thing, and then making soup with said vegetables and bringing the community in to enjoy that. So learning in a very, very different way. But again, putting those children, and they tend to be much younger children in that setting, into a different learning space, and so that they can grow skills and confidence and interest in a different way.
Yeah, really interesting stuff. And you touched on there really that sort of importance of partnerships. Are you seeing, in a world where funding is increasingly challenging, are you seeing more of those sort of creative partnership opportunities to bring around learning from different pathways, bringing things together? Is that something that you're seeing more of?
We're seeing a little bit of. I mean, I think I would say yes and no, because I think certainly in our land, we saw, and I know you talked to a lot of charities, and probably others have reflected this, but certainly in the post-COVID land, it was quite difficult for some charities to get funding from trust-making bodies because they were not doing sort of overt COVID recovery type things. But I do agree, almost because of that, and because actually more and more now, as we've seen, councils in trouble, where, somebody was telling me recently about, one of the sort of consequences of that is that where a charity, and this would not be us, but where a charity was getting money from the council, that's now not happening. And so there are more people going after the same funding pots, and therefore a more creative response is needed. I think for me, it's about being curious about what might be possible. So there's a corporate that I know of at the moment who is interested in doing something in the education space, and I'm talking to sort of somebody in between, and we say, well, let's just have a conversation. We can talk about how we have worked before, and is there a way that we can kind of enable that? But it's about getting around the table, isn't it, and talking about it and seeing what might be possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose has that increased competition for the same funding pots meant that you've had to change as an organisation in terms of the way you work? Does that mean that you've had to become more creative and more think in different ways and approach things differently?
Yeah, I think, well, because I think the other issue is, of course, you can't be keeping going to the same funding pot for the same project. So I think it has made us think about, as we look at the city that we work in, because we are just by nature of that kind of core funding, we are, from our music point of view, we work within Birmingham and not sort of out of it. The other side of our work can extend across England. But I think it does make us think about, particularly with the world moving on as quickly as it is, whether that's AI or, any other challenge that comes the way, what can we be looking at delivering? And therefore, what can we go to funders to ask them to fund that maybe is a little bit different and a little bit more creative? Well, not more creative, but just continuing to, build on that creativity. And to your question earlier about where schools' budgets absolutely are kind of under pressure, is there a different way we can help solve that problem? But again, that's everybody sort of understanding what everybody's trying to, I was going to say, get out of it. At the end of the day, what everybody is passionate about is the young person. And that's what's really interesting when you get some of these conversations together, because you get people are passionate about making an impact. And in a way, then, who knows what can happen.
Yeah, indeed. Lots of potential. And obviously, you mentioned technology and AI there. And most conversations that we seem to have on this show, AI seems to crop up at some point along the way. It's one of those common factors that lots of people are talking about. Can I ask, as an organisation, how you're approaching that sort of digital advances, that sort of digital strategy, that kind of thing, in terms of making sure that you are keeping pace with that evolving technology all the time? Is that something that, as an organisation, that you're actively taking hold of?
Yeah, well, we're certainly continually sort of horizon scanning on it and looking at what is going on out there. So we obviously have limited numbers of days where we can get the whole team together because of the fact that they're teaching in schools, but we did do that at the start of term in September, and one of the sessions was on AI, and actually our digital team had created a presentation solely made by avatars of them.
Okay, excellent.
More just to demonstrate what is possible, and really to kind of pique somebody's interest in it. I think we're certainly using it to help for research on different subjects and so on. I mean, I'm finding it really useful from that point of view, because what it can, with all the caveats around fact checking and this, that, and the other, but it's certainly used well, it can have time saving elements. And we're, as in many organisations, I think we're seeing some people are more naturally inclined to be interested in what's happening in the space. I mean, I think for a long time to come, there is always going to be the space for direct teaching of a musical instrument, thankfully, because that is a skill and something that people are rightly proud and passionate about. So I think that's helpful to know that, but we should always be watching what's happening around the edges. And, in terms of some of the products that you see out there now for composing music, just an example, things are moving on pretty quickly, aren't they? So we can't sort of rest. It's easy to say we can't rest on laurels. We need to keep watching on it and see.
Super important, because it's only ever going to get better. That's the scary thing with AI. It's just going to learn exponentially quickly in terms of
I think
improving.
that's the really interesting thing about it, isn't it? It's how exponentially quickly it is learning. So what AI looked like 12 months ago is so much better now. And like you say, that's only going to happen quicker.
I know. Scary stuff.
This is the part of the show which we dive into some of the latest charity and third sector news. So what have you spotted to kick the year off, Tim?
Well, I think you've got to kick the year off with the New Year's Honours List, really, haven't we? It's something that happens every year, obviously. And obviously the headlines are always grabbed by the celebs, aren't they, in terms of who's been nominated for the work they do, hosting random programmes on the telly or whatever it is that they do. Fair play to them. But underneath all of that, behind all of that, amongst the list, there's always a great spattering of charity names as well. So I thought we might as well start the year off by going through some of those. And I've taken this largely from a brilliant article on civil society, which goes into great detail, has quotes from all these people. So do go to civil society to check this out. So I am going to blatantly just read out what they wrote, but a fantastic piece there. So those people who were awarded and recognised in the New Year's Honours List included Sarah Anderson, founder and trustee of mental health charity Listening Place. She was awarded a damehood for services to mental health and to suicide prevention before her death from cancer on the 7th of December. Carol Homden, chief executive of Coram Children's Charity, was also awarded a damehood for services to children and families. Other charity leaders, trustees and founders were recognised among the list of 1,157 recipients, and those people included National Trust Director Hilary McGrady, who was awarded a CBE for services to heritage; Judith Gould, consultant clinical psychologist at the National Autistic Society, who was also awarded a CBE for services to people with autism; as was Angela Salt, former chief executive of Girl Guiding. Trussell co-chief executive Emma Reevey, meanwhile, has been awarded an OBE for services to the eradication of poverty, while Alex Rees, chief executive of the Infection Prevention Society and founder of It Gets Better UK, was awarded an OBE for his services to healthcare and to the LGBTQ+ community. Robert Nolan, chair of Deaf Blind UK, was also awarded an OBE for services to people living with deaf blindness. Helen Undy, chief executive of Money and Mental Health, was awarded an OBE for her contribution to voluntary services, which includes her leadership of Money and Mental Health. While Giles Shilson, who chaired the City Bridge Foundation from 2021 to 2024, was also awarded an OBE for services to outreach and inclusion and to charity. Craig Bennett, chief executive of the Wildlife Trusts, becomes an OBE for services to the environment. And Live Music Now chief executive Janet Fisher becomes an MBE for services to music and charity, as does Emma Rule, founder of Musicians Against Homelessness, for charitable services to homeless people and to aspiring musicians. I need to take a breath here. This is quite a long list. John Yates, chief executive of the Youth Endowment Fund, received an MBE for services to young people. And Philip Gerard, CEO of Deaf Action, also secured an MBE for services to the deaf community, cultural inclusion and disability rights. Chair of the Royal Free Charity, Judy De Winter, meanwhile, has been awarded an MBE for services to the NHS after being diagnosed with incurable blood cancer aged 33 and becoming a patient advocate. And Deepa Korea, director of the RCN Foundation since 2016, has been awarded an MBE in recognition of her contribution to nursing and midwifery. Meanwhile, take a breath. Meanwhile, Tressa Berg, chief executive at Glasgow Disability Alliance, actually rejected an MBE, saying online that she cannot accept a personal honour when disabled people are being so dishonoured. There are so many reasons, she goes on to say, why I had to decline an MBE at this time. The main one is that I cannot accept a personal honour when disabled people are being so dishonoured, she said. Political choices made by the UK government to cut disabled people's benefits and the services which are vital to support us, programmes like Access to Work, on the one hand are unforgivable portrayals of disabled citizens, but on the other hand make no economic sense. These measures, she says, will not get people into work, but will make people more unwell and create further inequalities and demands on services. So there we have it. that's the rundown. I feel pretty exhausted after that, but some incredible names there.
Cup of tea and a biscuit after that, Tim. Cup of tea and a biscuit, yeah.
Definitely.
Managed to get through that.
Definitely. But isn't that good though? There's so many names on there on that list. And huge apologies if I've missed anybody off. I'm taking this from what I've read on civil society. So if I have missed anybody off, don't blame me, basically. But well done, everybody. Huge congratulations.
Yeah, massive testament to the third sector. As we all know, champions at heart, all of them. I'm going to be quick because I'm not going to go through a list like you, Tim, but my one is music themed. So with the guest today and with the news that we've just gone, and it's the tantalizing prospects of a new album coming out from War Child, the charity there that's internationally famous, that supports the mental health of children affected by war. It's been going now since I think about the late 1990s, and their first album made over £1 million of profit for for the charitable cause that they do. So the War Child haven't released anything for a little while now, but as reported yesterday, so just before the weekend over in the NME, that it may be set to release another album with musicians such as Alex Turner, the Arctic Monkeys, Fontaines DC, Damon Albarn, likes of Depeche Mode, old rockers there, and English Teacher. Various artists all lined up, so hopefully we shall see 2026 the release of a new War Child album, which would just be absolutely amazing. Loads of artists there behind an amazing cause. So I think music fans and charitable third sector fans alike with bated breath for this. So it should be an amazing release if they get it done.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm showing my age there a bit. I've heard of most of those names you just read out. English Teacher I've never heard of. Is that a band?
Of course I have.
Really?
I saw you wearing a t-shirt the other day there, Tim.
Is that a person or a band?
We're okay with Depeche Mode.
Oh yeah. That's all good. Depeche, Damon Albarn, absolutely. English Teacher. I don't know if you. Is there a maths teacher as well? Geography teacher?
I don't know. I like their tunes. I'm not allowed to sing them. I get death stare side eyes from my kids if I start singing anything like that, especially someone like the Fontaines DC. If I start singing along to them in the kitchen, no, not allowed.
Yeah, I'm embarrassing myself now, and I know I am. Anyway, never mind.
Welcome back. In the second half of our conversation with Sharon Bell, we talk more about leadership and service, from volunteering and sector collaboration to why access to music and culture matters now more than ever for children and communities. Let's dive right back in.
Right, I want to move us on to talk about leadership and culture a little bit. Now, from what I've read, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that your leadership style is very people-centred. I think you described yourself as curiosity, well-being, coaching at the heart of your leadership style. Is that the case, and where did that approach come from for you, if so?
Gosh, where did it? Well, I think I said I've always had that people interest. My dad, actually, when he's retired now, but he was a HR director. So I wonder whether, there's often, isn't there, sort of something in the blood around these things. So that has been an interest for a long time. Way back when I worked at the airport, that's when I did my first coaching qualification as well. And I've sort of taken that further out of work in more recent times. But I think any kind of coaching builds that kind of curiosity thing, because a good coach is curious about the person in front of them or that situation. And I think, as I reflect on recent years, that's only sort of continued to grow, which is interesting. And I think, people always say people are people, but the different settings I've worked in. So for example, when I worked at the University of Nottingham, I had a couple of folk, one who worked for me in Malaysia and a couple in China. And so suddenly you had the interesting element of, yes, I mean, but it wasn't that long ago, but back then remote work was not quite as, we did do Teams and stuff, but, now it's second nature, isn't it? But what you did have coming into play, which I'd not really encountered as much, was the sort of cultural differences. And I think until you've worked cross-culturally, there's a learning that comes from that. way back, though, I mean, I spent a year living in France when I was a 7-year-old, and then again, sort of later in my working career. So I think that elements of that working cross-culturally, internationally, that builds curiosity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I did it many years ago. I did a leadership and management course, and I can't remember the name of the academic people who came up with the concept of the different personality types and the colours and the all that kind of stuff.
It's a version of the Myers-Briggs stuff, but
that's it. You hit the nail on the head. Yeah, fascinating stuff. That and really, really interesting in terms of how you take that into a leadership position. You describe yourself as I've said as that sort of people-centered leader, but you've also led through really challenging times in terms of sort of restructures, funding uncertainty, organizational transformations. Along the way, what would you say has been the hardest lesson you've learned as a leader?
Oh wow! Well, I think hardest lesson individually as a leader, but then built onto better things is, I've been made redundant 3 times, I think, during my career. But I think that's been really interesting. Well, interesting, maybe not the word at the time, because it always was a springboard to other things. But equally, I've had to make other people redundant as well. Thankfully not in this job, but, it has happened in the past. And I think when you have sat on both sides of the fence, as it were, I do think that makes you a better leader, because sometimes you can't avoid those really difficult things, but there's still a better way of doing it, or a good way of doing it. So I think that's one thing. I think COVID landed. I've been in this job for sort of 4 or 5 months. It was my first charity chief exec job, and COVID came, and that was a bit of a shock to the system. But I think in some ways when that happened, all I could do, and I know this is kind of a good and obvious thing, was to be yourself. So, I was very much about being, it's a bit of an overused word really, but as authentic as you could be, and, sharing as much as was possible, recognizing some things that you can't share. But I've tried to have as much of an open door policy as you can have in a world where we're much more virtual these days. But certainly that's the kind of style I want to be. And for some people, that's something they will absolutely take you up on, and others don't, and that's fine. But that's part of the fact that everybody responds differently, as we do as well, don't we, to different kind of relationships, leadership sort of scenarios.
What advice would you give to other charity CEOs listening to this show? What advice would you give to them about establishing a positive? It almost sounds a bit HR-y. When you talk about culture, you talk about organizational culture, people immediately sort of switch off because you think, oh, it's an HR thing, organizational culture. Oh, goodness me, I have to start talking about values and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of people can switch off. But what would your advice be to CEOs listening to this about how you can actually engage an organization's employees with the whole conversation around culture and bringing them on a journey to actually bring about a positive culture change within an organization?
Well, I would say we're still on a journey with this one, or still on a learning thing, because what's quite challenging about the way we are made up as an organization is that obviously so many of our colleagues are out and about all the time. So, I was in our offices yesterday for the day, and that's great. I saw the 12 people that were there, but there's 220 of us, of an organization, and most of those people are out and about in schools, and a lot of them are part-time. And the only reason I mention the part-time element, it's not that to me they're any less valued, but if you are only working for an organization for maybe 4 or 5 hours a week, which would be the case for a couple of people, how connected to the broader culture piece do you want to be? So that's why I say it is a journey for us still, because we're always trying to find different ways of communicating. But I think people just say, don't they, that you can't never, I'm going to say this the wrong way, but you can never under-communicate. You can never communicate enough. There's always more you can do. And we're always trying to find different ways to do it. So for 2 examples of that, the first Monday of lockdown, I was like, right, well, how am I going to talk to, my people that are out and about? And so I did a sort of 5-10 minute Monday video, fairly informal, off the cuff kind of thing. Up until about 6 months ago, every Monday since lockdown, Monday video has happened, or holidays accepted. We've only changed it to monthly now because we actually think that's what people want. Do you know what I mean? So it's not just keeping doing the same thing. More recently, we've been trying to engage colleagues, in our strategy. And strategy, a bit like you said, culture is one of those words, isn't it? Strategy is another of those words that people, it's a bit corporate, and what you're talking about. So we worked really hard at our current strategic plan, 25 to 28, is 1 page rather than the thing before, which was multiple pages. And then week by week, we are unpacking it line by line. There's essentially 12 bullet points, short email over 12 weeks by me and another member of the senior team. And the feedback that we're getting on it is actually quite encouraging, that people are liking the short, sharp, punchy thing, the fact that it's me plus 1. And so much so, we've got another 6 to do after Christmas. But we need to think about, okay, so if that's what people are engaging with, because they can look at the email on their phone between lessons in a school or, something like that, how can we take that lesson to our other kinds of comms and then continue to engage people in creating that culture that we want? But it's very drip fed. It's very different, I think, to somewhere where everybody was in every day, or even everybody was in 1 day a week. That would still be better than we are, because all our people are out and about.
It's very difficult, isn't it? Because, organisations aren't all together in an office anymore. It's not the way the world works. People work remotely, people work completely independently, people don't come together very often. So I totally empathise with your challenge. And when it comes to strategic plans and stuff, I've worked for organisations before where that's been done really well, and others have really struggled. And it is really challenging, especially if you've got a plan that is multi-year. Say you've got a 5-year plan. How do you keep your workforce on board with that over the duration of the plan, and not just something that they're engaged with, for the month after you've launched it, but they're with you on that whole journey throughout the 5 years? That's a real challenge, to make sure that it's not just something that just gets forgotten about after 6 months.
Well, maybe you need to ask me in a year's time. We're at the moment we're on our regular kind of drumbeat, and there's no pun intended in that, but we're on our regular thing of it weekly. But we've then, once we get to the end of that, how do we make it? And I think also, how does that person who's out delivering a training course in a school and doing amazing things, but how do they link that back to the plan? And I'm hoping that this kind of work we're doing at the moment will help with that. But we've just got to continue to do more on it, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. Total change of tack. I want to move us on to talk about volunteering and sort of personal growth and development and stuff. I was fascinated to hear that you volunteered at the Commonwealth Games.
Oh, yes.
And I know that was a big experience for you. What did you take away from that? And what could others learn from doing something as amazing as that?
Yeah, I think for me, that was I live outside Birmingham now. I've lived here for sort of 8 years or so, but before that in Nottingham for years. The point of saying that is that Birmingham is not my sort of natural home. Northern Ireland is where I'm from, but that accent has long gone. But the point is, it's a city that's become an adopted home, really. And so, being part of such a huge volunteering effort, and I mean, I don't know if you can remember in the Commonwealth Games, but my goodness, the sun shone on Birmingham. We were being looked at all that fortnight, and Birmingham looked its best. There's times where Birmingham gets as every city, don't they? There's times where the headlines are not great, but Birmingham, was being showcased in there, and there was an energy being part of a volunteering effort that was so big. So I was part of the media team. It sounds a bit more exciting than it was, if I'm being very honest. It was basically making sure photographers behaved themselves at some of the events at the NEC. But it was great. There was a buzz about the place, and it was a good thing to have done. I did apply to the Paris Olympics, but sadly they did not take me on the offer. I think for me that was the fact that I speak French, and Paris is a city I've lived in. I was like, I could go with that. But,
fantastic. I've got friends who helped out at London, who volunteered at London 2012. I wasn't able to do so because my daughter was born on the day of the opening ceremony, so I was rather busy elsewhere on that. But
funnily enough,
yeah. But they had such wonderful feedback and memories, and such an amazing opportunity. And I think that really, London 2012 and the Commonwealth Games are those opportunities when volunteers are really, really championed and made and appreciated. And I think that's perhaps something that's not necessarily the case in wider volunteering. I can say that from the perspective I used to be a scout leader as well, and I think a lot of people forget that these everyday kind of volunteer roles like scout leadership and these other kind of things, they're just taken for granted a little bit. Perhaps I might just being a little bit from personal reflection there, but I think
you make a really valid point there, don't you? Because there was much celebrated by the 12,000 volunteers or whatever it was in the games, and yes, it was great to do, and the fact that it was in my city is probably the only thing that makes. I mean, don't get me wrong, so many people travel to it. And fair play to them, because they will have had the costs of accommodation and this, that, and the other. It's a thing. But you're right, those kind of big events, the volunteers are absolutely celebrated. But I mean, every day, so much of our kind of so many sort of services and organisations that are offered in society are on the basis of banks of volunteers. And I mean, that was certainly something that shone through in the COVID years, wasn't it? That
absolutely.
so much support was provided by a sort of different volunteer armies, whether that was community organisations, church groups, whatever it was. There's been some studies sort of done on that, and kind of the economic impact of the volunteer armies is huge, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've also in the past been very open about how lived experience, including your own experiences of loss and mental health, has shaped your work. How does that influence the leader that you are today? Or how has that influenced the leader you are today?
Yeah, so my mum struggled with her mental health later in life, actually, not sort of through. And that mum sadly died at the start of lockdown. The two not particularly connected, but that lived experience about supporting somebody through a fairly horrific mental health breakdown is why I'm chair of trustees of a mental health charity. And it's often the way, isn't it? I think where if you, or more often than not, somebody you love or know is touched by something, whether it's that or cancer or whatever, then kind of our interest and passion for that thing is heightened in a way that it just wouldn't have been before. So that's certainly been the thing for me in the sort of mental health arena. And obviously, I saw there the extreme version of it, but I think, to your point about how that's kind of impacted into my leadership, what I learned, I mean, there's many things we learned from that experience as a family, but what I learned in that is actually mental health. I mean, some people do struggle with it over years and years and years, don't they? And we hear stories of that. For some people, like my mum, it was more of a flick of a switch. And I guess what that makes me think, and has made me much more aware of, is that the whole sort of mental health and well-being agenda, which sometimes can be a bit buzzwordy, but it's so important, and it's important to not see it as a buzzwordy thing. But what am I doing to keep ourselves as well as we can be in sort of every sense, of that word, and kind of having those outlets, whether that's the coffee and conversation with good friends, or whether it's going to the gym or doing a craft thing or making music, whatever it is, we need to kind of have our thing, don't we, that are our outlets. So I think because of what I've seen, that's made that very, very real to me as something to be, focused on.
Sure. Really interesting as well that you now chair a charity that looks at that focuses on mental health as well. How important is it, do you think, for people who are perhaps in your positions of senior leadership, maybe for one charity, but have lived experience in another area, that they also think about something similar? What could you give back to an organisation that your lived experience could benefit them?
Yeah, I think so. And I think whether it's lived experience or something you have a real interest or passion for that is sort of away from your day job. And it's really interesting because, it helps me with perspective a little bit as well. So, my day job charity is an income of about £7 million. My trustee charity is more like £100,000, because actually a lot of the work it does is working with churches to create cafe spaces where it's okay not to be okay. So going back to that volunteer army, it's a volunteer army around the world and very few paid, positions. But it's really interesting seeing the kind of governance in big charity land. I mean, I know we're not big, but, mid-sized charity land, and then the governance in a much smaller charity. And yes, there's an overlap, but there's also a difference. And I think it's kind of helpful both ways, really. So I think it's really important, and we would encourage colleagues at work to be involved. Often actually school governors is one that a lot of ours would kind of go and work for, but it might be the charity sector as well.
Yeah, fascinating thinking about how you can learn from each other in that sense. Obviously, there's a huge amount of experience that you can bring from a charity of your size to a much smaller charity, but also interesting what you can learn from those smaller charities, from the organisations that we've spoken to on this show. It's been interesting that the smaller charities are often the ones who are forced to, because they haven't got the money, to be more creative and to think outside the box. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I think the smaller charities are often the ones that are having to be so innovative in a kind of, because often their funding, it's a bit cliff edgy, isn't it? In the sense of, if that next bit of thing doesn't come in, then they just can't deliver whatever the thing is. So, the one I chair is a little bit different in setup, but I can absolutely see that in smaller charities, they are taking being agile to a kind of level that definitely we can learn from. Because it showed, didn't it, in COVID, actually, going back to the COVID scenario, because everybody had to, the sort of level of change and innovation and adaptability just went up exponentially.
Absolutely,
how those organisations would normally have been.
Yeah, it's amazing. The impact of COVID. We still talk about it every show that comes up in most conversations. Sharon, thank you so much for joining us. It's been such a rich conversation. I've really enjoyed chatting to you. There's so much that we've covered, so much we could cover. We can go on. I could feel we could go on for a long time.
Great, thank you.
Tell me, if people want to find out more about your work, find out about Services for Education, where should they go?
Yeah, so if they go to www.servicesforeducation.co.uk, you will find us there, or look me up on LinkedIn, and I'm there as well. I'm sure we can put that on the show notes or whatever.
Definitely. We'll stick everything on the show notes. But yeah, Sharon, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
On the show, we like to make space for small charities, the ones you don't always hear about, but who are doing brilliant work in their communities every day. They're often working with small teams and tight budgets, taking on big challenges and making real change happen without much of a platform. So we want to help share more of those stories. If you're involved in a small charity or you know one that deserves a bit of recognition, please get in touch. You can email us at thecharityshowpod@gmail.com or use the links in the show notes. Tell us who you are, who you support, and what would generally make a difference to you right now. We'll do our best to bring those voices to the show. So Piers, who have you got this week?
A small but mighty charity this week from me. It's a Sabrina Oakey, who got in touch with us to shout about the Baby Basics Northampton, supporting over 3,000 families in Northamptonshire by creating emergency Moses basket starter packs. These packs are a gift of hope for the new journey as parents and ensure that the newborn baby is a safe place to sleep. The charity is currently supporting 1 in 16 babies born in the county of Northamptonshire. So fantastic small charity there. And thanks to Sabrina for highlighting it to us.
Great. Really, really good work they're doing there. Also, we heard from Anonymous member 875. Please do tell us your name. Tell us who you are. Don't hide behind. No need to hide behind anonymity on this show. You tell us who you are. But they got in touch to tell us about Friends and Places Together. Friends and Places Together is a small Southend-based charity helping vulnerable young people to see their friends or make new friendships outside of school and college. We give, they tell us on their website, we give the opportunity for young people to socialise independently with other young people, and their charity motto is everyone has the right to have friends and a social life. I think that's a really lovely idea for a charity. Well, a great theme there. So 2 brilliant small charities once again.
Yeah, 2 small charities making a huge difference. And don't forget, if there's a small charity you think we should feature, drop us a line at thecharityshowpod@gmail.com or head to the link in the show notes to nominate them.
And that's a wrap for episode 40, the first of 2026. A big thank you to Sharon Bell for joining us and telling us about the amazing work of Services for Education and her own career.
And if you'd like to share your own story with the wider charity world in 2026, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you and welcome you on to future episodes.
Absolutely. Please do get in touch. But we'll be back in a fortnight's time when we're going to be taking a closer look at your world, Piers, at celebrities and charities. So please don't miss that one.
Yeah, it's always fascinating when the worlds of celebrity and charity collide. Lots of tips and tricks and pitfalls and bonuses as well. So give us a follow on your usual podcast platform to make sure you don't miss that one.
And while you're there, please give us a quick 5-star rating. It really helps other people in the sector to find the podcast.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Charity Show.